Today we're doing integumentary, starting that system, which should come as no surprise to you because we've talked about that. Integumentary system, and this one was a tricky one. I've been going through it, and it's
we should probably skip it.
I agree.
Skip it. It's been hard for me to separate the anatomy from the physiology on this one. So I've been working on it. I've been working on separating the anatomy from the physiology because there are some that it is easy to separate the anatomy from the physiology, and then there are some that it is harder. So, like the kidneys, super easy. The digestive system, super easy. Others, not so easy to separate the anatomy from the physiology because they're more kind of interconnected. So this was one of them. It was like, well, yeah, that's more anatomy. That's not as something. So anyway, so I've tried my best to take out the anatomy and leave the physiology. But in this one, they're really kind of connected together. And you got to kind of know one to know the other. So we're going to go with it. So the integumentary system consists of the skin and then what are called the skin appendages. So the skin itself is the cutaneous membrane, and then the appendages are the sweat glands, oil glands, hair, and nails. So those are considered the appendages that go with the skin. So we're going to kind of be learning about both, but the other thing with the skin is there's a lot of receptors and sensory things. So we're going to be doing a sensory lab a little bit later on that goes with that too. So not only are we going to learn about the skin, we're going to learn about the senses that go with the skin, thermal regulation, and then we're going to learn about like skin diseases and disorders, burns, blisters, skin cancer, those kind of things as well. So it's all kind of falls into this category. And anatomy, we did talk a little bit about like burns and that kind of thing. We didn't talk about skin cancer, but we will talk about that with physiology.
Percent off my next purchase. Maybe an energy drink.
Energy drink.
See?
Aren't there some out in that?
Yeah, but those aren't the good
Yeah,
ones.
look, those taste weird.
They're not good.
You need this Red Bull Monster Ghost.
I was disappointed with our drink selection at Walmart this week because they raised the price of Pepsi too. So mostly I got a lot of Sprite because I know you guys like Sprite.
ADR like Sprite, that's it.
Last time I got Sprite though, the Sprite sold
I'm
pretty well.
telling you, you should just get one thing of energy drinks and see how they sell. And
I have to sell them for more. And I don't know how I feel about supplying you guys with energy.
You can sell them for $2, people buy them.
I know, probably.
You will be making so much bank on them.
On what?
Energy drinks.
That's true. If you sell them for,
Like $2. $2, $1.50.
Okay, Wyatt, use that new
if you buy energy drinks like
that
online,
new formula thing.
if you buy energy drinks online, it's gonna be.
Yes, I shared it with you.
Yo.
So what they do to your neck, man?
I thought it was a custom.
Disc replacement? No. I had surgery Friday.
So why are you here?
Where'd it go?
I'm
Grind up
fine.
stop.
Is this it? The one she's using?
Look at the board.
Two?
Yeah, so like you can, if you have a,
Just the one? Yeah.
you can literally just buy a case of energy drinks. And
You know what? We're
the
gonna
markup on them when you buy them in the store compared to online is like a decent dollar. So like if you bought them online, you could sell them for like market price and they're so much more. Like a case of 32 or whatever, they sell for like.
You're in NHS. You're on the snack committee. Find it. Help me out. Which, speaking of which, I think we're gonna have an NHS meeting next week, and
At
I'm
12?
gonna put you and Caitlin and the other officers in charge. So
Of the meeting?
of me.
What's the topic? Well, we need to do the project.
Okay.
But
And I'm gonna, after today, I was worried
it's
about.
too cold now. How are we gonna
You
go?
can rename it.
We should have
Do a
done.
different project.
Here, I found a case of Red Bull for $20. You sell each one for $2, make $4 profit.
Okay.
No.
Just
Just want to
on
go
your
to
own.
H-Town next hour maybe? After this hour, the next hour? Go lunch?
But we're gonna have an NHS meeting next week and we can talk about this stuff at the NHS meeting. But I'm putting the officers in charge of the NHS meeting, so.
Look,
But I was gonna talk to the
pack of
officers.
15.
After today, I needed to get through the Halloween
24,
stuff.
so each
There were a
$2.
bunch of hiccups.
Almost like $12 of profit.
Alright, anyway, the skin is the largest organ of the body, and it weighs about 6 pounds altogether. It covers 3,000 square inches and has multiple layers and accessory organs and sensory structures and glands. So we're gonna spend tomorrow, assuming how many notes we get through today, talking about the glands of the skin. And then the next day we're going to talk about like some of the accessory organs and thermal regulation and that kind of stuff.
This is kind of off topic. Would you say your tests are the same difficulty as testing college?
I would say so.
Mm-hmm.
I think no.
They are certainly intended to be.
So did we change it?
First drivers on their twice, one of them just needs to be most artistic.
Or would it be
First.
One of them has
I knew you were gonna say it. I knew you were gonna say it.
No.
Looky. The layers of the skin are dumb.
Oh, look. Excuse you. Your body appreciates it.
No, Jeff, basically what keeps you alive.
Cap. Why do every morning you put something?
Wake you.
So Colton, from here on out, you'll be like with the rest of us.
You kind of got unlucky with this. He's not even paying for the dual credit.
Well, there's some in here who aren't.
Like who? Call them out.
That's their decisions. I don't have to take this class.
And also,
It's true, the grading scale is like.
Miss Ayers, you could sell those monsters. The price for you buying them would be $1.70. They sell at H-Town for $3.
I'm telling you, you
Scam kids like each of
you
those.
can make so much money.
Well, they have to make a
People will buy it.
profit.
Nah.
People buy it.
I will run the energy drinks by Fisher to see if
Except
he's
you can
okay
get
with
They're
that.
lucky.
But considering
Nine,
they
that's not a good
sell
idea.
them
Some kids can
at
pass out
the,
in practice and it's gonna come back to the stairs.
Trace had 6 monsters.
Oh,
they
Big
sell
Star.
this from the vending machine. I
Just
just,
you
I don't know,
buy
I
them all out.
hesitate
You can buy them.
passing out energy drinks. I mean, soda's one thing,
Right.
but
It's the same thing.
I guess you like keep track of, like, only can buy one a day.
One at a
But that's
time.
more work for you.
Just keep a list.
Yeah, keep a list.
24 pack for.
Then kids are just
I want
having
a pack.
their
I
kids
want a
buy.
pack for $36 and sell each for $2 here. Almost $12 profit.
Like,
Just
you
take
talk
that.
so fast.
Yeah, we'll also make like a black market.
Yeah, like,
Like a black market. That's okay.
all right, you don't have to write this down. This is in Google Classroom. Did I post the student notes for this?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes I forget to post the student notes. That's why I check.
oh,
Um,
our grades on Google Classroom for the test. Are they on there yet?
No.
Gosh.
I had to wait for everybody to take the test.
I know, she said she was grading on Friday and I was like, alright.
Yeah,
Well,
you
they
were-
are graded.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
So I thought you were
but
gonna post
I
ours
might
for
curve it. I haven't decided if
You
I'm gonna
should.
curve it yet, but I have to wait for everybody to take it.
Good to those kids.
That can't hurt anybody's grade, right? If you curve it.
No,
Oh,
curving only helps.
For the curves!
But I have to wait for everybody to take it.
Curve.
Anyways, why is skin important? It insulates and cushions the deeper body organs. Without the skin, your entire body is exposed, and it provides the water. It prevents desiccation, prevents you from drying out. So when anybody is burned very severely, they're very worried about infection. They're very worried about you dehydrating because all of your moisture is basically seeping out. So bacteria infection Your skin helps absorb vitamin D. We talked about that a little bit when we talked about vitamins and minerals. Thermal damage, it helps you manage the heat and the cold. Your skin is your first boundary for that. And it prevents chemical damage and mechanical damage. Mechanical damage is like bumps and bruises and cuts. Chemical damage is like acids and bases. And basically, it's just your primary barrier for everything. It keeps the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. Because the outermost layer of your skin is dead, it does a good job of preventing the bad stuff from getting in. And all the stuff that you want to stay in, it does a good job of keeping that inside.
Would you like me to run the monster with the energy drink idea by Fisher?
Yeah, I think you should have a student run by him.
Like, as an HS vice president.
First class has a storage full of monster.
Yeah, but he does not like this one.
And like how much restrictions like a basketball player can on it.
That's it. So
We still drink. Probably drink.
I will ask because I need to hear it from him.
Restrictions.
But you can look up prices and figure out.
Being covered with it.
I would go for the zero sugar conversation.
Oh,
That's what I was gonna do, zero sugar monster.
Like his life or death.
So it was money, not money, too.
Okay, so all of that was in Google Classroom. Oops. All of that was in Google Classroom. But this is not. The skin also helps control body temperature, aids in excretion of urea and uric acid, but this is kind of to a minimal degree. Mostly this is going to be kidneys that do this, aids in excretion of urea and uric acid. But our sweat does this to a minimal degree. When we sweat, a little bit of urea and uric acid is also secreted. And then of course synthesizes vitamin D, the skin helps with that. It does do a pretty significant portion of that. So getting vitamin D by going out in the sun does help us. And this is another reason why we actually do get sick in wintertime. It's called cold and flu season, but the truth is those cold and flu viruses are around all year. The reason we get them more in fall is because we are in close proximity to each other. We're inside more. It's not a coincidence that we all come into school and touch the same things and we are all in the same confined spaces and then suddenly we all get sick. It's not so, those same viruses are around all year. You can get sick in the summer. It's just most of the time we spread out in the summer. And we're outside more in the summer. We're getting more vitamin D. But in winter, we're inside, we're compacted, we stay in the buildings more, we don't go outside. We don't get as much vitamin D in the wintertime because we don't go outside as much. So, yes, it's a cold and flu season, but it's mostly because we're inside more. And then in spring, it magically goes away. No, it's because we're outside more in the spring. We don't compact ourselves into confined spaces as much.
That was my goal with me. I really didn't have it.
Quiet. Stop.
So going back to the skin and the skin layers, the skin has two main layers. We have the epidermis and the dermis. There's also something called the hypodermis, but technically the hypodermis isn't part of the integumentary system. The hypodermis is underneath and it is mostly composed of adipose tissue, but it's really not part of the skin. The skin itself is really just the epidermis and the dermis. The epidermis is the outermost layer and the dermis is the layer that's right underneath that, and that is the skin. The hypodermis is really kind of just like the in-between the skin and the tissues underneath. And it's mostly fat, it's kind of a shock absorber, it's kind of an insulator, but not really skin. not who you put, what the options are.
Anyone's.
These ones are lame. Like, commit to a full
I got a superlative in high
I said
school.
295 and this one.
What's your consideration most likely to be own a lizard?
Most likely to be the science.
Most likely what?
To own a lizard.
To own a lizard.
Most likely to succeed.
That's me, bro.
No, it is, no.
Your
I
head.
can't remember
Your
what
head.
mine was.
First driver.
No, I think it was like most likely to have 10 kids.
In high school.
Close.
Well, Jalen.
Close.
Oh, Alex 6 is about to have her second kid this month. Do you know that? Girl that's a year older than us is about to have her second kid.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
No.
Kid?
Sully's cousin is
No.
Jalen.
Oh.
I don't think they're cousins. I think they're just neighbors.
No, they're yeah.
So how's that?
Sully's always said yes.
How's that for you?
Jail.
It's just like a writer's cousin too.
Oh.
They're just really good friends, like their parents.
Oh.
You can ask questions.
That's cool.
We're all in the same shoe size.
I thought she did.
Yeah, well,
I thought correct.
Can we get the Dwayne Wade pictures?
So I put this picture in there, not because you need to memorize the parts. There will not be a labeling. The labeling is definitely anatomy. But we need to be familiar enough with the parts that we know what we're talking about. Okay, so I put it in there because we're going to be referring to like the different glands, the different layers and things like that as we go through it. But the labeling is definitely anatomy, so if you take anatomy, you would need to know the parts and you would need to label this. But this is more of a reference because we're going to be talking about the different structures, referring back to them, and you need a picture to get an idea of what we're talking about. So we're not labeling this, but we need to talk about it as a reference. If you take anatomy next year, you will memorize this. Yes. So this is what you have to look forward to, because this is definitely anatomy. This is what you would do in anatomy.
Great.
Maybe not match for.
This is also what you would do in anatomy, is you would learn the different layers. But again, you're not going to be memorizing it in this class. This is the epidermis. The epidermis has different layers, specifically 5 layers. The uppermost layer is dead, and then the lower layer is, and then this pink is the dermis down here. But to explain in physiological terms, mitosis is happening down here. Okay, you guys know mitosis, cell division, yes. So this is the alive layer, and this is the dead layer. So as you're going up, the cells are being pushed up and dying as they get closer to the surface. So each layer, this is all epidermis, and then this is dermis down here. As you're pushing upwards, the cells are continuing to die. Now there are 5 layers in just the epidermis itself, and each layer going upwards, the cells die more and more until eventually they flake off. So a lot of what you guys are breathing in, those dust particles that you see, yeah, a lot of that's dead skin. So, I know it sounds gross, but yeah, a lot of what you see floating around is dead skin. Because every time you kind of like go like this, you just release dead skin into the air. So there you go, have some dead skin. That's pretty much what it is. So the live tissue is down here. This is the basal layer, and this is where mitosis is happening. Also down here, you're gonna have a lot of your receptors. And so this is called a Merkel cell. This is one of your receptors. We will talk about the receptors and what the receptors do, because that is physiology. So these layers are in Google Classroom. You don't have to write them down, but these are the layers of the epidermis. Stratum corneum, that's at the top, and then working your way deeper into the body. Stratum corneum means the horny layer because it is the dead outermost layer of the epidermis, and it is very keratinized, which means that it is very hard and it's pretty much dead. Shingle-like dead cells, and they're filled with keratin, and it's the protective layer. So this is, have you ever done that thing where you take a needle and you like stick it under the first layer and doesn't hurt? Yeah. No. Doing that.
I don't like it. Put with those needles.
Well, you can put it under the first layer of
Okay,
skin.
I just want to talk about something.
Yeah. But it doesn't hurt because that's that first layer of skin. There's no nerves under that first layer and it's dead. So this first layer of skin is your stratum corneum. There's no nerves there and it's dead. Then you have your stratum lucidum, but the stratum lucidum is only in the hands, palms of your hand and soles of your feet. So you're not going to find that stratum lucidum like on your arms or on like your stomach. It's only on your palms of your hands and soles of your feet, the very thick skin. Stratum granulosum is next. This is where it's starting to die. It's kind of granular. That's how it gets the name granulosum. And then you've got spinosum and basal. Spinosum and basal, these are the more living layer, especially the basal. But spinosum is also kind of living because it's closer to the blood vessels. Anything close to the blood vessels is going to be living tissue because it has to have blood in order to live. And so basal is the closest to the dermis. It's going to have the most blood flow to it, and it's going to be the one going through mitosis, and as it goes through mitosis, it's pushing upwards, and anything rising upwards is going to, the further away from basal, the more dead it's going to be. Does that make sense? So I may not expect you to know all the layers, but I'm going to expect you to know the basics, that the bottom layer, the basal layer, is going through mitosis. And the further away you get from that basal layer, the more dead it's going to be. Okay, I'm going to expect you to know the basics of it.
Say that again.
The basal layer is going through mitosis, and then as you go up, they get more dead.
Yes. Because you have to be near a blood vessel in order to get nutrients. The further away a cell gets from a blood vessel, it's not going to be able to get nutrients and oxygen and things.
With the layer of mitosis and further we get more dead.
And more dead it gets, yeah.
Got it.
So if we go back to like this picture here. So here this is all epidermis right here, just this one layer. So within this one layer, there's 5 layers. And so this is those 5 layers. Here's your basal,
Wait, we go back to the, what'd you say it was?
right here. This is epidermis, just right here. And within that, we've got these 5. And here's your basal. And then we've got spinosum, granulosum, lucidum, corneum's up top. Here's a saying, come let's get sunburnt. Come, let's get sunburnt.
Ooh, that's a great one.
I didn't learn that one. I thought of, could Larry get some bacon? Could Larry get some bacon?
Good Larry, get
I
some
could use some
bacon.
bacon.
But come like, let's get sunburnt is good for the skin.
Yeah.
All right, any questions about that? All right, melanin. Melanocytes. Melanin made by melanocytes. Anything ending in site is a cell. Site for cell. Or medical terminology students should know that.
What'd you say?
That site means
Oh, yeah,
what?
I knew that.
Yeah.
Melon means black.
Dark. Good. And site means
So,
cell. Good job. Site means cell. Melanin does mean dark. So melanocytes produce the dark pigmentation of our cells. So these are going to give our skin their color, and it can vary depending on, I mean, we have a lot of different skin colors. We have people with dark skin, we have people with light skin, and then all kinds of variation in between. So melanocytes are what give us our skin color. And their color could be yellow to brown to black, lots of different color variations. And this is produced, the melanocytes are mostly in the stratum basal, so then the epidermis and that stratum basal layer. And they are, they release kind of like these little granules that are in the pigments. And these little granules are released into that stratum basal layer, and so the pigment kind of comes upwards. This is why if you get a suntan in the summer, it will gradually go away throughout the winter, but it takes a while because eventually that stratum basal layer will eventually move upwards and basically flake off. But it takes a while. Amount of melanin produced depends on genetics and exposure to sunlight. So more sunlight, you get darker, you get a suntan, but eventually it'll fade away in the wintertime if you're not exposed to the sun as much.
What flat parents contain?
What?
What flat parents contain?
You must just got wrong combo.
Stupid it is.
No, you're just pale for the rest of your life.
Red hair.
Shit, I got screwed. It says on the thing.
What's the service right now?
There,
Did you
there.
sit in there?
Yeah, I'm just starting to release.
Is that they're starting with?
Yeah. We should be starting over release. At least. Maybe. Doesn't take me very long.
Yeah, he sucks.
Yeah, he sucks at defense.
I think he's there.
He's
Little chop focus on what you're learning.
No.
So what's your hair gonna look like after that?
That's too.
What's my what?
It is scary.
Curly suit.
Really suit.
No curly suit?
No.
Uncultured swine.
Curly suit is great.
Yes.
So I'm trying to focus on that.
Yeah.
So these are what melanocytes look like. Within the basal layer, within the basal layer, it's one big cell that kind of has branches that go off and kind of in between the other cells in the basal layer and deposits pigment into them. The pigments release these little granules, and the granules darken the cells, and it can release a lot of granules or just a little bit depending on the overall skin color. And this shows how it looks in an actual like tissue sample of a dark-skinned individual, and so this one has a lot of pigment coloration. So can have a lot or can it have a little bit. And sometimes, I mean, this is also responsible for like freckles and moles as well. So it can be concentrated in one area if there is like a mole here, for instance. So this would be like a little darker area and not as dark over here. All right, so that was the epidermis, but now we can move on to the dermis. So here is this one's the dermis here. I was having trouble seeing that. The dermis is right underneath, and the dermis has these projections that go upwards into the epidermis. And the dermis is made mostly of connective tissue. The connective tissue is going to connect down into it, and these projections are actually quite important, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So the dermis has two layers called the papillary and the reticular. Now the papillary has something called dermal papillae. The dermal papillae, they make it so that the layer doesn't fall off basically. If you had the dermis and the epidermis right on top of each other, they would kind of have, like one of them would slide off, the dermis would kind of slide off. But because you have the dermal papillae and then the epidermis fits on, it's like they're interlocking with each other. And so the two are kind of gripping and interlocking with each other. So those dermal papillae that go upwards into the epidermis makes it so that the two are grabbing onto each other so that they don't slide around as much. For fingerprints, it has a lot to do with how the dermal papillae interact, and they're basically kind of identifying films of sweat. So how the sweat is going to like leave little marks behind with the dermal papillae. This shows the different layers like under a microscope. Here's our epidermis, starting with our basal layer here and moving upwards. And then here is our papillary layer. And then here is our reticular layer. Our reticular layer especially has a lot of connective tissue. And then our papillary layer right underneath. So this is the whole dermis, kind of a light pink. And then from the dark purple upwards is our dermis. So skin color itself can be made from three things. We talked about melanin, but we can also get skin color from keratin and hemoglobin. Melanin is the main one that provides our color, but keratin is kind of an orange-yellow pigmentation that is from some vegetables.
Oh my God. My son used to eat so many carrots that his skin was literally orange when he was a baby.
It really does. I mean, we'll look at some pictures in a moment that you really can get. It's been called a vegetable glow, and it is actually considered appealing and healthy. Yeah, it's supposed to be kind of a, there's been some research done on it.
Like
that
subconsciously.
yeah, that it is a healthy glow. Yeah.
Healthy offspring.
And then hemoglobin is the other one, blushing and flushed appearance. So like if you've been out running in the sun, your face turns red. So we actually looked orange.
Yes. Oh,
That's funny. I guess I've never seen it myself.
really?
Mm-hmm. they did so much. Like they went in the front twice, and then one time they went in the back. 2 times it was in Wichita, and then the first 2 times when it didn't work, we were like, we need a new doctor. So then he went to Kansas City, and after that time, we think they finally got it. He has so much metal and plates in his neck. It's ridiculous.
I'm sure he's got arthritis like crazy.
Well, the first one was like a bone spur, so they put like,
Was it
and it was a
caused?
slipped disc.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so they put a plate in through the front to hold the disc in right, and then that didn't work. So the second time was the worst because they went in through the back and he has a huge skull, and that was the worst one. And then the third time there's a bunch of scar tissue and stuff in the front of it, and that one they like with kids and stuff.
Yeah, I had a lot of thumb spurs and stuff to clean up, and then they had to decompress, so that's where no smoking is, just soreness from the infection. I'm sad night.
I'm surprised Black is doing it.
What?
I don't mind commuting this afternoon.
Should be impressed.
I'm not
It
good
was
at
just
that.
kind of impressed. I'm not good at that.
You don't want to come there?
I think it's a mom thing.
He does think it's sport, that's what I'm saying.
At least you're in your cozy.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't mean I want.
Okay, so this first picture shows how keratin works. This is before. This was an experiment that they did, and then she ate a lot of vegetables, and this is what they call a vegetable glow, and it gave her this like healthy appearance. And they kind of did an experiment where they like compared her appearance and like which one looked the best, and people found most appealing, and people found this vegetable glow to be the most healthy and the most like visually appealing, and then this was a suntan, and so they found that this one made her appear the most healthy. So the vegetable glow was the one that was most healthy, and eating the vegetables made her most appealing. Melanocytes, this is just a variation of different colors of melanocytes and how it can change the skin appearance. And then hemoglobin, a flushed appearance of hemoglobin, how a skin can appear flushed with that kind of variation.
Try to make it like recon.
So redness is called erythema, and you can get that from embarrassment, inflammation, hypertension, fever, or allergy. Any of these can cause your skin to just turn red. You could also get blanching, which is pallor. This is due to emotional stress. If you get really afraid, you can say she turned as white as a sheet. Anemia, if you have very low iron in your blood, low blood pressure, impaired blood flow, it can turn your skin white. Jaundice, which is a yellow cast to your skin, means your liver isn't working properly. A lot of newborn babies get jaundice. This is very common. We'll look at a picture on the next slide of a baby that has jaundice. And then bruising is another discoloration. Bruising is basically you have a blood vessel leak in the skin. It just hasn't reached the surface, and the blood is leaked out of a vessel in the skin. Think of your skin as kind of like a sponge, because it kind of is. And basically your blood has leaked out into your skin, and your skin has kind of absorbed the blood. That's what a bruise is. And eventually your skin will reabsorb that blood and break it down, but it takes a while, which is why the bruise changes color. I told my kids that, and they were fascinated by it. It's like, you mean I'm bleeding inside? It's like, yes, it's okay though. Your body will heal itself.
Those are right.
Not for a while. A good time. I think we're almost done anyways. Yeah, we're almost done. It's the last like writing slide, and we just look at some pictures. We'll make it. I don't know if we can. We'll make it. We just got some pictures after this. So much to learn, so little time. Okay, so here is jaundice. It's a distinct yellowing. I like this picture because here's two babies, probably twins. One of them has jaundice right next to a normal baby. And so you can distinctly see how the yellowing is. This again is very common in newborns. I think all of my children had jaundice to some degree. Especially in newborns that are breastfed. It's just a normal thing. None of mine had it severe enough that they had to be hospitalized for it, but they all turned yellow.
Do you put them in the window?
Yeah.
By the window?
Yeah, stripped them in a diaper, put them in a window. That's how you cure jaundice.
Sunlight.
Yep. Sometimes they do need special lighting, but for newborns that have it just a little bit, you put them in the window, and the sunlight, the vitamin D, helps to break down the jaundice. Blanching, this is an example of blanching when the skin gets really white. So this is just kind of an extreme example of it. And then bruising is when the blood leaks out of the vessels. Here's another example of bruising. So there's damage here to the vessels under the surface, and it has caused blood to leak out around and not rupture to the surface and out of the body, but the body kind of absorbs it like a sponge, and then eventually the body will reabsorb it, which is why it turns colors, turns like to yellow eventually. All right, so obviously we're not starting a new assignment today because we're out of time, but we did get through all the notes, which is fantastic. So we will learn about